exciting, amazing thing on for you today. Dr. David, he was Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche's doctor. He visited Nepal in 1979 to work and volunteer as a volunteer doctor for the Himalayan Rescue Association. After working near the base of Mount Everest, he moved to Kathmandu to begin a 15-year career as the medical director at the world's busiest destination travel medicine clinic. He provided free medical care for a Tibetan Buddhist monastery, Chokyi Nyima Rinpoche, and his father Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche. He also offered free medical care to all newly arrived Tibetan refugees who came over the Himalayan passes from Tibet. He is the co-author with Chokyi Nyima of Medicine and Compassion, an American doctor and a Tibetan Lama on how to provide care with compassion and wisdom. The book has been translated into 7 other languages. He is currently planning to offer medicine and compassion retreats in Jackson Hole, England and Bhutan, that is COVID-19 permitting. He has written a memoir entitled A Gentle Rain of Compassion, Travel Medicine, Tibetan Lamas and Love in the Himalayas. He is looking for a publisher also for the memoirs. We wish you all the best for that, David. Thank you.
Thank you. So, hi everybody. Thanks. So I had 2 things tonight. A short video that would just show you what it's like to go visit Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche when he was alive. And then I was going to talk about the experience I had taking care of Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche when he had a heart attack and how that related to my own heart attack 28 years later. So that's what I want to do tonight. So can we go to the video? Get me sharing the screen? If I hit share screen,
yep.
Is that okay? And then if I click on this and share.
David, does the video have sound?
Yes.
So when you, if you could just stop sharing, and then before you share, when you're choosing the application, so
okay.
Go ahead and press share, but before you actually start the share.
Share computer sound, there's a tick.
There
okay.
you go, that's it.
And should I hit the optimize screen share for video?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Except it doesn't do it. Okay, so all right, so let's see if we can share this. Oh, fuck. Excuse me. Are you seeing this or not?
Yes, we're
Okay,
seeing that.
so then I will make it the full screen and I'll hit play. And you can hear me while it's playing. I can do a little, I can talk over it.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to set the scene. So this is at Chokyi Nyima Rinpoche's monastery. Tulku Urgyen was down, staying there for a while, overseeing some construction. And whenever we would leave for home leave, which would be about 2 months of the year, we would go and say goodbye to him wherever he was. So this is where he happened to be. And our son, who you'll see in the picture, is about 14 months old. And so that's what this is, kind of just a home movie of what it was like to be around Tulku Urgyen. So, so he's talking to our nanny and asking her where she's from, and she's saying where she's from outside Kathmandu. I asked her if she could read and write. It's my wife, Jane, son, Matthew. It's Lama Oser. He's giving me this bell in Dorji as a present at this point and explaining it to me.
Very different experience.
What year is this, David?
What's that?
What year is this?
1992.
Yeah, people sometimes explain this precious explain.
So that's why then I told them.
My name is Audrey.
The sound is this one is great.
Those are lychees.
Good boy.
That was first try. There. Okay, so I don't know. I hope that was enjoyable. It shows how natural he was. You know, I mean, we're reading this book about him, and there's all these incredible stories and things, you know, and so, but this is what it was like for him. And he didn't have the crowds of people that Chokyampa Rinpoche has, you know, visiting him. And so it was really lucky to be able to go see him, and we had all that time. And so that's what that was like. And, you know, and I still have these things that he gave me from there. And then Lama Oser came to Jackson and taught medicine and compassion retreat. And so that was him back in 1992. So I've known him a really long time. So, like I say, I hope that was helpful. And then I wanted to talk about something. So I moved to Nepal in 1983, and I had some vague ideas I had done yoga a lot in my 20s. I was now 33. And, but I really didn't know anything about Buddhism. I'd had some funny experiences outside the monasteries up in Khumbu, kind of a desire to learn more, but it hadn't happened. And so in 1984, after I'd been living in Kathmandu for a year, I offered to do free medical care for the monastery, Chokyampa Rinpoche's monastery, at which time it had about 80 monks. Now there's like, I don't know, 250 or 300. It keeps growing all the time. But so I would go out once a week and just see whoever was sick or needed some medical care. And then after I'd done that for a year, I got a call one morning from Chokinima Rinpoche about 5:30 in the morning, and saying that his father was having some chest pain up at Nagi Gampa. Could I go see him? And so that in those days, Nagi Gampa had no electricity, had no telephone, no radio, no way of communicating. So a monk had actually come down in the morning and gotten all the way to the monastery before he could pass that message. And they called me, and I met them at my office in a Jeep. They provided the Jeep, and I packed up a portable electrocardiogram machine and the drugs that I thought might be useful if he was having a heart attack. But I was pretty concerned because there was no cardiac care in Kathmandu anywhere at that time. No intensive care, no coronary care. I didn't know what we could really do, and I'd never been up there, and I had never met Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche, because he just stayed up there all the time and I didn't have a reason to go. And as we drove up there, the road was terrible and terrifying. And I felt like the wheels were inches from the falling off an abyss. And then we got there, then we had to walk another, 40 minutes or so. In those days, the trail was very undeveloped, just dirt. And finally got up to where he was in his chambers. And the story was that about 10:30 at night, the night before, he'd started having some chest pain and difficulty breathing, and it had gone the whole night like that. And they couldn't go for help because Nagi Gampa is on the mountain called Shivapuri, which is in the King's Forest, and so it's locked at night, actually, the gate down below, and they won't let people out. So that's why they had to wait until dawn to be able to get help. So anyway, so that was my introduction to Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche, and I asked him, I said, how are you doing? And he said, well, it got pretty bad for a while last night. I thought for a while that I was going to die, but I didn't. And I thought, it struck me. I said, who is this guy? He's been up all night, no hope of medical care or anything like that. And he just goes, yeah, I thought maybe I was going to die for a while, but I didn't. And so it really, really struck me that he had no fear. But we still had to decide what to do. So I hooked him up with the EKG, and it showed that he was having this massive heart attack called a left anterior descending heart attack. Heart attacks depends on which vessel is blocked, and this is one of the worst ones. This is a heart attack that's called the Widowmaker. And so then we knew for sure he'd had a heart attack. His pain was starting to ease off. If you have a heart attack and you don't get to medical care, eventually it stops hurting. And so that was starting to happen. But the risk is having a sudden arrhythmia, a sudden cardiac arrest during this period, or going into some heart failure because your heart can't pump. And so I'm sitting there with him and monks and nuns all around. I can't remember if Chokinima Rinpoche came up with this. You would think he did, but he can't remember either. Interestingly, we've talked about it. But so I'm up there, and actually I don't really know who Tulku Urgyen is in a sense of what his reputation in the world was and is at the time. I just knew that he was Chokinima Rinpoche's father, which made him precious enough. But so the question is what to do. And getting him down to Kathmandu, where there's better medical care, but not specifically cardiac monitoring or anything, would have involved carrying him on someone's back down these slippery trails for about half an hour, 45 minutes to the Jeep, and then driving for an hour and a half, and then not being any really much better off at that point. And so thinking all that through, I decided we would just leave him up there, that would be the safer thing to do, even though in my whole life I had never seen anyone with a heart attack and not taken them to the hospital or been in the hospital when they came. And so it was kind of and so when I finally told him that, and I said, I think that we should just have you stay up here, he said, "Oh, good." I didn't really want to go down to Kathmandu. And so I finally left because I was working. And I came back, I think, the next day and then over the next few days to see him, to see that his heart was still pumping and all that stuff. And if he had the reason people are in the hospital is so you can monitor them and see whether you do CPR or something if they have sudden arrest. So we knew that if he had a cardiac arrest, he would just die. But if he didn't, then he would be okay. And so that's what we ended up doing. But his complete lack of fear, the first person I had ever met who just was having a heart attack and wasn't scared of dying, really struck me. And I was, just very new to Buddhist teaching, just barely getting started, really. And but that had a profound effect on me. And then it was kind of funny because I go up to see him and he'd be sitting up in his little room on the top of the nunnery there above the temple, about an 8 by 8 foot room. And, just sitting there. He didn't have TV or radio or anything. And so then I asked him, I said, what do you do up here all day? And he said, "Oh, I practice non-meditation." And I thought, yeah, that's what I do. I'd go the whole day without meditating, and it really was 10 years before I understood what that term meant, what he said just so casually. I practice. I go, I do that. So anyway, a lot of stories in between, a lot of things, but eventually what happened, and here I want to share some slides, so I'll go to share screen again, although this doesn't have sound. Let me see. Are you able to see that now?
Yes.
No?
We see.
I think it's thinking still. Hey.
It's got the Zoom audio device. Please install. Please restart your audio sharing application. Huh.
What is it? What kind of app are you trying to share, David?
It's just PowerPoint.
Your video is frozen. There might be a glitch in your internet right
okay.
now.
Let me.
There you go.
That's working. It's working.
Okay. All right. Let me run the slideshow. Now, can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, we sure can.
All right. So I just wanted to show, this is where I live. And it's where I am right now in the house on the right there and the mountains behind. And it kind of looks like that right at the moment. There's no snow on the ground, although there was a couple of days ago. But just to show where we was. And then what we do in the winter, which I had learned after I came here, is we can go what's called backcountry skiing, which involves hiking up on your skis. You put some what are called skins on the bottom of your skis and allows you to walk uphill. And then you can take off your skis, your skins, and ski down. And what this gives you is access to this untracked snow that's in the backcountry, which you don't have at the ski resort where everybody's tracking it up all the time. So this is just to show you how, if you want to get this deep snow, that's my son.
David, are you flicking through the slides? Because we're still seeing the first slide.
Oh, I am going through the slides and they change on my screen. I'm sorry.
Maybe go out of, yeah. Okay, let's try that.
Okay, I'll make it bigger. So this one, can you see, is this playing a video now for you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the deep snow. This is the appeal. This is why we go out here. And this actually turns out to be about 10 days before my heart attack. And so we went out to go skiing that day. And initially I wasn't going to go, and then I decided to go, and we were a little bit late because we had to do some extra stuff. And so we started skiing in, and it was a snowy day like this with a lot of new snow. And it was about -10 Fahrenheit, which is what, about -20 centigrade, a very cold day. And started skiing in, and I started getting this pain in the back of my arms. And I thought, God, that's really weird. And then I started getting this kind of burning sensation under my sternum, my breastbone. And I thought, oh, that's could be my heart, but it's probably just that thing I ate. And so I kept going for about half an hour, thinking about whether I was having a heart attack or not, but in pretty strong denial about it, I guess, in retrospect. But I didn't say anything to anybody. So my wife and friend, John, eventually got ahead of me because I was starting to get short of breath. And so finally, I just actually got so short of breath that I couldn't go anymore. It kind of happened kind of suddenly, and I just kind of fell over in the snow, and I couldn't really stand up, and I was all alone. And because my wife and friend had gone around a corner. And so I managed to call her on the cell phone, which was lucky because it doesn't always work up there. And said that I wasn't feeling very well. And so she said she would come back. And then when we got back, it wasn't clear what to do. But it's kind of funny, in between, before she got back, this other couple skied by me because I was on a trail, kind of a flat trail. And I was laying there just breathing. And they said, "Are you okay?" And I went, "Yeah, I'm good." I just don't know why I said that, but that's how I was dealing with it. So finally, we just didn't know what to do. I couldn't walk. I couldn't stand up. And another guy skied up who was a physician's assistant. And I knew him, and but not that well. And he asked me what was going on. And when I told him, he said, "Well, it looks like you're having a heart attack. We need to get you out of here. Jane, why don't you call 911? And he just kind of took over like that. It was a really amazing thing to me, really, just a calm voice and just, yeah, here's what you do. And then I was worried that when Jane called 911 that they would be saying, how do you know he's having a heart attack, and where are you, and stuff. But she was on the phone only about 30 seconds, and they said, well, they're sending a helicopter. And we had seen the helicopter earlier that morning. It's a volunteer rescue service, and they had rescued 2 other snowboarders that morning who'd been stranded overnight. So it was ready to go. And so then, did that change for you?
Yes.
And so then I was laying in the snow, and it was very cold, and I was starting to get cold. So here the guys are actually holding me next to them, try to warm me up a little bit while we figure out how they're going to move me, because you can see we're on a steep slope with deep snow, and it's just really not clear how we're going to get across. But I knew from my experience of rescuing people in Nepal all those years with a helicopter that it wouldn't be able to land where we were. And so they were going to have to carry me across. So the helicopter did arrive relatively soon, but couldn't land where we were, and so flew about a half mile away and landed to wait for us. And so finally, they wrapped me up in a tubular space blanket and stuffed it full of all their extra jackets and things like that. But you can see what a difficult situation they're in. I'm pretty passive at this point, but I'm all bundled up, wrapped there. And right around this point, I heard someone say, we're going to have to stamp out a platform in the snow if we have to do CPR. And another person went, shh, like it would not be distressing for me to hear that. But it was actually, when I heard that, I thought, actually, I could die, because I hadn't really thought about that up until that moment. But I said, I could die any second. I go, maybe I should be doing something. So I wanted to show you these slides to show you that the circumstances I was in was not very restful, not very relaxed. I was shivering, but I didn't really feel that cold. And so I thought to myself right then, I started thinking it through, what I should be doing. In the meantime, they couldn't see me very well. So they were like every 30 seconds or a minute, they were saying, Dr. Shlim, are you okay? I go, yeah, I'm okay. But in the meantime, I started reciting something that I liked to say, may all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. I'll attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. And so I started reciting that because I thought that if I died, I would die really suddenly with a cardiac arrest. And so I thought, okay, if I'm not meditating, at least I could be saying something virtuous. That was my thinking. I would just keep reciting this. But then I was still going. So I thought about my family, because my wife is there. She's in the blue jacket at the back holding the ski pole. And my son was off at college. My daughter was in Jackson, but wasn't up there. And I thought about them, and I thought, okay, if I don't die, then I'll get to still be with them just like before. So I don't really need to think about that. But if I do die, I'll never see them again. And so I better just not I don't need to think about them. It was really strange to do that. I didn't feel a grasping or longing or something. I just thought, okay, I'll either get to still be with them or I won't. I'll be gone. And so I put that aside. And then I thought, maybe I should try to meditate, and which was, trying to rest in mind nature. But I just wanted to show you that, not in a good circumstance here, but still that's what I was thinking, being dragged and set down and lifted up and set down. Are you okay? But that's what my mind was doing. And so started meditating, and then I remembered that if you're in this situation where you might die, that it's a good idea to try to visualize your teacher. And so I tried to visualize Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche, because he was the one who really taught me to meditate, even though I'd had this 30 plus year relationship with Chokyi Nyingma Rinpoche that's really close. I thought of Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche. And one of the reasons that made me think to tell this story is that something that Bronwyn had written I think one of the very first questions was, what does it mean that your teacher is always with you? Do you remember you wrote that? And so I tried to picture Tulku Urgyen the way that I have seen him, which was sitting in his room with this kind of red sweater and over a yellow shirt, and the kind of skirt that he wore, and sitting there and so on. But as I tried to visualize him, he actually appeared to me looking different than that. And they just appeared in the sky, standing, and wearing this kind of long, lightweight robe, that I had never seen him actually wear. And it was initially, I remember, a kind of tan color, but then it kind of changed into a blue color and he was standing there, and he wasn't saying anything. And the sky seemed clear, even though it was completely cloudy and snowing. And so there he was. And it was just there in my mind. I mean, I don't think I could see the sky because you can see the situation that I'm in. But that's how it looked, as if he were in the sky above me. And just standing there. So then the next thought I had is I should try to merge my mind with his. This is something that they teach you how to do. And when I'd been around him in real life in Nepal, Often I would try to meditate when I was around him, and I would feel like my meditation was more stable just from being near him. So I had some experience of that. So then I started feeling like I was kind of just moving right towards him. And it's important, the way that I describe this, because I didn't feel like some people, like I didn't feel like I had left my body. I hadn't died. But I did feel like my mind was drifting up to this image, just moving towards it really slowly. And it was really kind of blissful. There was nothing else in my mind at that moment. But I began to realize that when I merged with him, whatever that, it was a feeling that I was actually moving towards him, that I would die. And I also realized that even though things were going pretty well, that after you die, things can be different. So I was just saying, well, okay, I'll give myself my best shot. This is what the teachings have always been about, is what happens right at this moment. So I will certainly try. But as I was kind of floating up there in this situation that felt really pretty good, I heard myself say, and I need to put it that way because I don't remember forming this thought. This is what's really interesting to me. I don't remember thinking this, but I said it. I said it really kind of hesitantly. I said, but if it's okay, I wouldn't mind sticking around for a while. Just like that. And then everything kind of paused. And then I felt myself moving back towards whatever this situation that you can see in the picture there. And the image of Tulku Urgyen, the vision, gradually faded. And I was back in this kind of, situation. And people, how are you doing? All this stuff. And here I've been having this whole vision and experience, and they're having this different experience. And they're actually, I found out later, I talked to all the rescuers and stuff. They were terrified. They really thought I could die, and that would be really hard for them and really bad. And so we were having two really different experiences up there. And then finally, they got me to the helicopter, and I got flown down to the local hospital, which is only about 6 minutes away, but it doesn't have any ability to do cardiac catheterization, which is what I really needed. So then I had to get flown in another airplane over to another hospital about 100 miles away. And so even though I could still die anywhere along the line, I didn't feel scared anymore, even though I don't remember thinking this at the time. But the strange thing is when I arrived at the hospital, I finally got to see the monitor. They hooked me up, and the shape of your EKG is what determines what the location of your heart attack. And so when I saw that, I go, oh man, this exact same heart attack that Tulku Urgyen had, as if to hammer home the point, that he had taught me how to have a heart attack the very first time I met him, and then 28 years later, I had it. And so then finally, after all that was done, then I was in the hospital in Idaho Falls that same night, having had a couple of stents put into the vessel that was clogged. And that's what happened. So then, of course, I needed to talk to Chokinima Rinpoche, but that took a few days, and it turned out to be a pretty bad connection. And but he said, don't worry, you'll be okay now. And then I said, yeah, I had a vision of Tulku Urgyen. And he goes, yeah, that happens a lot. it's your karma, your connection with him, and you did some practice and stuff like that. And then I was still kind of stunned by the whole experience because it wasn't anything that I had actually ever thought I would experience. And so a couple of months later, Pakchak Rinpoche came through. So very unexpectedly, but very welcoming, and stayed at my house for about 4 or 5 days. And so I asked him about it, and he said the same thing. Yeah, it's not that big a deal. And I said, I kind of feel like this was a good experience. He says, yeah. He says, an experience like this is worth a lot of meditation, is what he said. So, anyway, so that was the story I wanted to share because it had a lot to do with Tulku Urgyen and what it's like to, and they said, yeah, Tulku Urgyen's always there. I mean, that's what they were saying, he's always there. And so just thinking of him at that moment, and he appeared. And so I had that experience.
What year was that, David, that you had the heart attack?
What's that?
What year did you have the heart attack? Which year?
Oh, this was now 2013, 7 years ago. I'm
glad you are around.
Thank you. Yeah. No, and I've done a lot since then. So I don't know, this, if it's okay, I wouldn't mind sticking around a while, was a kind of feeling. And then I had this other little thought that I barely could say because it sounded presumptuous, but I was thinking, well, maybe I can still be of benefit to somebody or something. And so since then, I've been working a lot on this medicine and compassion project and doing retreats and trying to get a medical school curriculum and doing stuff like that. And so, I feel lucky. And also when I'm around my family, I mean, would have really changed things up for my kids and my wife and stuff. So, and then I wanted to say one more thing, because this is really a sophisticated group. But so in 1987, I got to do a pretty cool trip to Tibet with Tashi, who was a monk in Chokinima's monastery who was translating for me in the clinic. And I didn't have anyone else to go to Tibet. And 87 was still pretty early. You could still travel around just by yourself, but you couldn't, really travel with a monk. So Tashi went in civilian clothes and we traveled together, and he could translate. We could talk to people and all this stuff. And so we got to be pretty good friends. And then later he did a 3-year retreat and he became Lama Tashi, and he served as an attendant to Sokni Rinpoche, and later he had this experience, which I don't know if all of you know about. When Mingyu Rinpoche, Chokinima Rinpoche's youngest brother, went on this, what turned out to be a 4-year kind of walking about yogi retreat, Tashi recognized him around the Bodha Stupa, even though he was in disguise, basically had a beard and long hair and all this stuff, and ended up joining him. It's quite the story that he told me. I met up with him in Kathmandu a few years ago and joined him for about 1.5 years of this, being a wandering yogi and living in caves and people bringing him stuff and so on. So when I told Tashi the heart attack story, he had what I thought was really good advice, and that's why I wanted to share it as well. He said, okay, you've had this experience, he said, but when it comes time, that you might die again, then don't think about this experience. Just be fresh in that moment, whatever's happening with your meditation. Don't try to recreate that experience that you've already had. And I thought, that makes a lot of sense, because there would be a tendency to think, I've gone through this, it'll be okay, but I don't really know. And the other thing about this experience that makes it kind of favorable in a sense is that for the heart attack situation, it was really all or none. I was either going to be okay or I was going to die. And so it's not like being in a plane that's going down over the Pacific, or having cancer and knowing that there's no way that you'll be cured or something like that. So there are a lot of different ways to die. But in this particular situation, I was facing really actual death. But if I didn't, then I was likely to be okay, which is a different way of dealing with it. So maybe that in the future, I'll have to have some other kind of way of dealing with this. So that's the story. Any questions?
David?
Yeah.
It's Michael here. Did you ever, I'm assuming you have, but did you ever attend or join in when Tulku Urgyen did a name burning ceremony for the dead?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Could you maybe share a little bit of your experience with that with everyone? Because it's very related. I did it many times. But.
Well, in this 15-year period that I lived in Nepal, I was getting this education that I didn't know where it would go or how far it went or anything. There weren't many books in those days, and I hadn't studied much. I just whatever my teachers told me. And so then about 1988, then one of our nurse practitioners named Gilda Goldman, some of you may have met her, who was very close to Tulku Urgyen and Chokyinima Rinpoche. She died when a truck she was driving rolled off a road. She was driving it down to pick up her boyfriend and a friend who were kayaking, and it rolled off the road about 300 feet, and she was killed. And in those days, in Kathmandu, you had to go get her, we just drove all night, and got a body bag from the embassy, picked her up and, drove her back, put her in the freezer and all this stuff. But then Tulku Urgyen did this ceremony that Michael's talking about up at Nagi Gompa. And it was the first time I'd ever seen that. And it was the first time that I had ever participated in something that was designed to help the person who had died rather than the people who were grieving. And that was my first glimpse of how powerful that is, that despite the fact that we might feel bad that we've had a loss, from a Buddhist point of view, their mind is the thing is having this experience and feels lost and all this stuff. And so Tulku Urgyen did this puja, and maybe about 30, 40 people, friends of Gilda's, came up to Nagi Gompa that time, and it got dark. And as part of that, they have a photo of the person who's died, and at the end they burn that, and so it's kind of, you see the flames and the picture disappearing and so on. But he also performed poa for her with his very powerful expressions and things like that, and so everyone up there had the feeling that he had really contacted her and really had done something for her. And that's what everybody said later. There's another angle to this story, which I rarely ever talk about because it's strange. But again, this group is an interesting group. But so a few days later, I was talking to Chokyinima Rinpoche, and the two guys, her boyfriend and this other really close friend of mine, were feeling really guilty that they had allowed her to drive the truck. It was a really bad road, and that she had died as a result of that. And then Chokyinima told me privately, he said, I saw Gilda earlier in the week, and I saw that her life force was diminishing. I go, what? He goes, yeah, I could tell. And he says, when that's happening, then they're going to die. Nothing you can do. And I said, oh, so if the truck hadn't rolled off the road, she would have had some other reason to die? She goes, yeah, she wasn't going to live very long. And I had never heard that. I've never heard it since. But it made me think what an awesome responsibility of what these teachers are actually, what they see when they see us. Because he didn't say anything to her, because he said, what good would it do? Just make them, what if someone told you that, And so then I was having trouble really believing that or not. And then a couple of days after that, I saw, my mind's going blank. Another great Lama who'd been staying at Nagi Gompa, and one of the 4 regions, I don't know, my mind suddenly just left me, but, and for some reason he said, I saw Gilda last week, and I saw her life force was diminishing. I mean, he just completely reinforced it, not knowing that Choki Nima had told me that or anything like that. So I don't know about what that means, but I thought I would share it because no one ever has those experiences. Any other questions?
Was that shared with the boyfriend and his friend?
Yeah, and it helped. It's an interesting angle on it, isn't it? That it wasn't. What he had said to them before he told this to me was that, you were careful. You told her she didn't have to drive. She could stop anytime. It wasn't your goal. You didn't try to risk. You didn't try to do anything to harm her. Don't feel guilty. But then he later told me that other angle to it too.
David, I'm deeply touched and just, my heart is just, oof. Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
Excuse me, I have a question. You're not talking about Gilda Radner. You're talking about another Gilda?
Oh, Gilda Goldman.
Oh, where was she?
She was our nurse practitioner at CWET Clinic when I worked there. So I worked with her for 5 years very closely, and she was also connected with Tulku Urgyen and Choki Nima Rinpoche. And then they just went out to do this weekend trip, and then she died. And she was the first of all our friends in Kathmandu to die. And so it was the first chance that I had to go through experience of how lamas would help with that was through her and through what Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche did for her. And ever since then, I've seen it over and over again, how powerful it is for people who haven't really thought about what happens when you die to focus your attention on what you can do for the person who's just died rather than on yourself. And I think I know many of you have had similar experiences. And but for those of you who haven't, it's something to think about, because what we're taught isn't purely theoretical. Either mind continues after you die or it doesn't. And in my situation where I thought I was going to die, I realized I would soon be, if I died, I'd be in some situation where I needed to recall all my teachings. And so that's why I was able to focus on it at that moment. So as we practice, as we gain confidence, it really, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but there's zero chance that you won't have that experience someday.
David, thank you for sharing this. It's really powerful. So this actually reminds me, I'm from Tibet, from Lhasa.
Mm-hmm.
Mother, she's very devoted Buddhist. And then I remember she, from time to time, she would consult this Lama, someone in the monastery. I mean, for a long time, up until now, I always feel it's superstition. I always laugh. If there's some issue, she would. I remember there's one year my grandma was really, really sick. So she sent someone to
Got it? Cool.
to say, to ask what happened to her when she died. And so the Lama said, no, you will not die. Even someone put a throw axe on your head, you will not die. And then I just laughed off. I said, no, this is so, I always feel that's, it's superstition or something. But it's, when I listen to your story, I think, yeah, maybe it is, there's something more to that. It's, thank you for sharing.
Yeah. You know, I mean, it's not, to me, it was inspiring in the sense that, I mean, and it's funny, I've been teaching a Tibetan Buddhist class here in Jackson for about 20 years, and at Chokinima's request, actually. And so 3 or 4 days before my heart attack, I was teaching and I was talking about impermanence. And whenever I talked about impermanence, it used to make me really nervous. You know, I mean, if you really think about everything's impermanent, it's not that comfort. I was not that secure. And then 3 or 4 days later, I go through this experience and I go, impermanence has arrived, you know. And, but luckily it, you know, it didn't completely, but it's, you know, it's what we need to bear in mind and have a purpose to our practice, because the moment of death is something that's filled with opportunity for practitioners, and so we should study that, and we should try to think how we could take advantage of it, and then be less fearful and more confident when that kind of situation actually occurs. That would be that's the end point of our practice in this body, you know. And so, anything else?
Hi, David. Thank you for sharing that. I have a question regarding Tulku Urgyen's heart attack. Did he require any medical follow-up from that? Because it's amazing that he kind of he had it and then seemed okay.
Yeah. Well, you have a heart attack, and then the muscle that died, you know, because of the lack of the pain, is all from not getting enough blood supply to your heart muscle, and your heart muscle can't stop beating, and so it dies and it gets some scarring. And he had a fair amount of heart disease, and so he eventually died of end-stage heart disease. You know, eventually is the scarring and the lack of blood supply, despite maximum medication that he was getting, and had really good cardiologists from Germany that he would see and would manage this, because they were more expert than me on this stuff. But eventually they couldn't keep his heart going. So he did eventually, 11 years later, die of his heart disease. But in between, he recovered from his initial heart attack and was fine. We didn't have any limitations to his activities until maybe a year or two before he died. You know, then people began to notice that he was limited by chest pain and so on.
And was there ever traditional medicine working together with Western medicine, like Tibetan doctors?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the one thing that I realized from taking care of Tibetans for a really long time is that they're very practical, and whatever medicine works. So because all they had up at Nagi Gampa when he first had his heart attack was Tibetan medicine, they had a special bean that they could fry, and this stuff is supposed to help, and maybe it did help. Maybe it helped keep him alive or something like that. But I think that as his heart disease went on, he relied mostly on Western medicine. He also had diabetes and had to take insulin and other things, you know, so he had gone beyond what was possible in Tibetan medicine. And then one time when we were sitting with him, I don't know, a year or two before he died, he just said, yeah, he died at 76. And he said, one day he just said, yeah, most of the lamas from Kham die when they're around 60 or so. He says, the only reason I'm still here is because of Western medicine.
Thank you.
David, I have a question. It's just so incredible that this one human was the father, to these other 4 incredible teachers. I'm just curious if you were around the sons with him, and if there's anything about the relationship that you saw between them and him that you could describe.
Well, they just seem very respectful. I mean, Michael had a lot of experience of that too, but when Tulku Urgyen died, then I at some point I was talking to Chokyi Nyima Rinpoche, and I asked, I said, how are you doing? And he said, of course, he was my father, but he was also my root guru. And if you've ever talked to lamas, their root guru is more important to them than their parents. The person who pointed out their nature of mind to them and helped train them in it. And so the double loss, that's what I saw, that he saw Tulku Urgyen more as his teacher, even though he was his father. And the other brothers, Sokten Rinpoche, Choling Rinpoche, Mingya Rinpoche, I think they enjoyed his company. I don't know what they did in private. I don't have any insight into their relationship.
Thank you.
Thank you, David, for sharing the story. It was really inspirational. Thank you. But it also is good to always have a phone on you, I learned. Without the phone, you would not have been rescued the way you did. But I have a comment in regards to knowing when the life ends. And I was very touched by what Chokyi Nyima said, that he felt and knew that the life of this person came to an end. A friend of a friend who was a big fire chief in Oakland, California, he did a lot of social work in Nepal. I forgot his name. It's a friend of a friend. And he had a very bad accident with the car. And because he said, I need to be transported, someone helped him, and they had to stop a truck. And that truck had another accident, and he died. He died. It's when the life force is done, then
karma is inescapable.
Yes, it is.
But we don't know. We don't have the insight. We don't have the clairvoyance to know when that is actually happening or not. So we see it more in retrospect, that people die despite all the efforts to keep them alive, or they survive despite what looks like hopeless situations. So that's how we get some glimpses of it, but we otherwise can't see the forces that are.
Yeah, very inspiring. Thank you again.
I have a question too. Thank you for sharing your wonderful stories. And I think you were present when Tulku Urgyen passed away. And I was wondering, were you? No?
No, you were wondering what?
If you could speak a little bit about this experience. How was it about his tuktam?
Michael was up there. So I wasn't in Kathmandu when it happened. We knew that he was sick, but I had to go to Sikkim to teach some trekking guides. It was a program that I was doing there. And so that was the next morning that I was over there that my wife called and passed a message that Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche had died. And I really hit me. But I had to go teach. And so this friend of mine, close friend of mine who was running the program, she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Well, this is what he's been training us for, impermanence." And so I did that. I taught the thing. And then the next day we were coming back And I was crossing the border into Nepal, and I had to sit there for a while they were checking my passport and stuff. And this drunk, really aggressive kind of guy came to the window and really wanted some money and this and that, and I didn't want to deal with him. But the more obnoxious that he got, the more my mind rested in my nature. I go, Jesus, I'm just like, and then all the time on the way back, and when I would do my meditation, I could meditate way easier. So finally, I got a chance. I asked Choki Nyingma Rinpoche, I said, what's going on here? And he said, oh yeah, when a great master dies, then all his students mingle with his mind for a little while as it moves out, And so, I have a description of what happened when he did die, sitting up and stuff. Michael might be able to say more about that, but we might save that because I have some videos that I thought I would share later in this book club after we've maybe finished the book, where carrying Tulku Urgyen's body down in a truck and all the devotion of that, and then his cremation and so on. I have some footage I've never shared of that. But the thing was that when I did, because great masters die and rainbows appear in different signs and symbols and things you read about, but with Tulku Urgyen, none of that stuff happened. But the sky went completely clear, and all the dust settled, and the mountains were suddenly out really clear, like they hadn't been for years. And I thought, wow, it's nice that it's nice weather. We're going through this. I couldn't connect it with him at all. And then Choki Nyingma, I asked Choki Nyingma, I said, were there any signs? Did anything happen? He says, no, just this clear weather, for like 3 days, just not a cloud in the sky. And every time after that, I don't think there's ever been a day in Kathmandu there's not a cloud in the sky, that just somewhere over the mountains. It's a mountain. And just for those 3 days, there wasn't any. And then at the end of 3 days, there was a little cloud that appeared right over Shivapuri. And then it started to be normal weather again. And so a lot of his students had this experience of being able to meditate more easily as his mind spread out like that. So these are he said, the signs of the really great masters.